All right, so welcome everyone. My name is Morgan Freshour. I'm the Assistant Director in the Office of Student and Family Support. I'll be your host this evening. This live panel will be running for 1 hour. It will be recorded, so we will post it once we have it downloaded on our YouTube, and we'll post it to our Bluejay Family portal as well. We will also be utilizing the Q&A function tonight, and I asked that if everyone could help me give it a test run, that would be amazing. So your Q&A function is found at the bottom of your screen. If you click on that and open it, just put in where you're tuning in from tonight, just to make sure we see it's working. Omaha, Nebraska, amazing. Kansas City, St. Paul, California. Look at all these fantastic places. Hopefully they're a little warmer than Omaha. Thank you all for giving us that test. If you have any questions throughout the evening, feel free to drop your question there. Folks will be able to answer your questions either typing back to you, or we'll have a section at the end to answer your questions. Brooke, you can move on the slide, please. I'd like to give a thank you to our Golden Go Jays Bluejay family sponsors, Cobalt Credit Union and Kookaburra Cookies. They're awesome partners, they're awesome folks. Go check them out if you haven't yet. Next slide, please. So Strive to Thrive just kicked off this month, and this is an initiative through our office, the Office of Student and Family Support. It is to support your Bluejays, you and your Bluejays throughout their time at Creighton. It typically takes 12 to 16 months for a student to feel at home at their institution, at their university. And we want to make sure that they're feeling good. And so through Strive to Thrive, we are really just making sure that parents, families, students reach out to us if they have any questions. And the email that you can reach out to is thrive@creighton.edu. And we will be able to connect back to you, answer any questions that you may have, and just make sure you feel supported. So again, that email is thrive@creighton.edu. And then our next slide is about the Office of Student and Family Support. So our office is here again to support you and your Bluejay throughout your time at Creighton. You can stay connected with us through our Bluejay Family newsletter, our Bluejay Family live panels where you're currently at, our Bluejay Family Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. If you ever have any questions, you can email our email, which is family@creighton.edu. And then also staying connected with our Bluejay Family portal. And if you ever have any questions or are looking for some answers that you're not really sure where to go to, we always say if you don't know what to do, call 1212, which is our Success Desk's phone number. We have a great group of student staff who work that desk, and they will connect with you, answer your questions, or connect to the appropriate resource to get those questions answered. Again, that phone number is 402-280-1212. It's on the slide right there. So if you ever have any questions, give us a call, send us an email. We'll be happy to help. So tonight we will be hearing from campus partners in housing, dining, residence life, and as well as student accessibility services. We have some great panelists, and I want to introduce them all to you right now. We'll have Adam Stafford, the Director of Housing, speak, Mary Bremer, our campus dietitian, Taylor Logue, the Assistant Director of Residence Life, and then Ann Hyman, the Director of Student Accessibility Services. Excited to hear from you all tonight. I'm going to turn it over to our first panelists, Adam Stafford. Adam, take it away.
Thank you, Morgan. Thanks for having me tonight. Thanks to all these families for coming out, especially Tracy Moore from Albuquerque. I think we've talked once before, but as a New Mexico native, it's always nice when I get to see somebody from New Mexico. Not necessarily a whole lot of us here in Omaha. And today's weather is probably a pretty good reason why. We can go to the next slide. So my name is Adam Stafford. I just completed my second year here at Creighton as the Director of Housing. My office works in tandem with the Office of Residence Life. My team's responsible for most of our housing processes, which includes the application for housing, recontracting, our assignments process, room changes, move in, move out, those kinds of things. I also work as a liaison for facilities management. when there are facilities related issues, either preventative maintenance, deferred maintenance, responsive maintenance in the halls. So we cover sort of the business and beds side of things. Residence life, and Taylor will speak later. They kind of do the people and programs. So we go to the next slide. I'm going to speak primarily tonight about our sophomore recontracting timeline. I think it's a pretty straightforward process, but there can be a lot of moving parts and there can be some confusion. It's a little bit of an emotionally laden process. So students get a lot of hopes invested in their housing choice for next year, but I can tell you every building on campus has a thriving community and people who are excited to be there and are enjoying their experience. But we want to take a minute to walk you through the timeline to talk about some pieces that may hang up some students frequently, and most importantly, answer any questions you have and maybe give you some topics to talk about with your student to make sure that they're prepared. I think one of the toughest things that we navigate alongside families, parents, and guardians in particular is the duality between our agreement being signed with and by the student, and often the parents have sort of the financial responsibility, but because we have the license holder as the student, we don't always communicate directly with you like we do with the student, and they don't always read their emails. So we work in partnership with you all to make sure that that information gets through, gets absorbed, and gets retained. So you can see the timeline up. We just finished our junior senior recontracting process for Opus Hall. We'll have a few minutes to work out the last little bits with that. And then on March 7th, Friday, we will open the application. There's a quick application for students to fill out. Sophomores are required to live on campus, just like they were their first year. If you are a local family, local within the Omaha metropolitan area, you can opt into having your student live at home. We have a process and a form for that. If you have not done that this year and think you might explore that option for next year, you can contact us and we can talk about the request process for that. But everybody will need to fill out an application, and we do have every year we have some sophomores who just don't do it. Even though they are required to live on campus, they do need to fill out that application. Not filling out the application won't release them from the residency requirement. It will just make sure that they go last in picking a room, which always adds compounding frustration levels for students. Alongside the application opening, once they've completed that, they can start to form their roommate groups. We want students to get into a group of 2, 3, or 4. I could talk a little bit about the breakdowns and how those match up to different rooms on another slide. They'll have about 2 weeks up until Monday, March 24th to complete that application and to form and verify their roommate group. A verification of a roommate group says, this is it. We all agree. This is our group of 2, 3, or 4, and we are set. Give us our lottery number and we'll pick our apartment when it's time. We have changed our process to hopefully it should auto verify roommate groups now. That's been probably one of our biggest hangups is if your roommate group isn't verified, you will not get a lottery time. And so students won't be able to go in and pick first. They won't be randomized in that first group. They will have to choose last from whatever's left if they're not verified. So as long as they go in, they get their group verified, and they don't go in and change anything, their group will stay verified and they shouldn't have an issue. Groups that become unverified do get a reminder email that their group is not verified. We send regular communication out to students who haven't completed their application or are missing some step. Often it's 4, 5, 6, or 7 emails that we send students when this is all said and done. So they do get a lot of communication about it. The week of March, so we close the application on March 24th. Sometime during that week, between Monday and Wednesday, they'll get their selection time, their lottery time, emailed to their group. Probably around Thursday of that week, when we've sent out that time, they can make some changes to their roommate group. If these groups can be a little ephemeral sometimes. So a group of 4 wants to become a group of 3, a group of 3 wants to bring somebody on. There is an opportunity for them to do that. Usually between that Thursday of that week, or a rough timeline, and when we actually get into the lottery the following week. But coming into the 24th, we want everybody to have their application completed and sort of have a sense of who their roommate groups are put together and verified. Then that week of the 31st, we will do the sophomore housing lottery, where we have, it goes every 5 minutes, one group at a time, but every 5 minutes there's a new group choosing from, they go on to the housing portal, they can see all the apartments and suites that are available to their group. And they can choose from what's there. So if they go within the first couple of hours, they'll have all those options available to them. As the days go on, buildings start to fill up and their selections start to dwindle. At the very end, there may be a small number of students who are put into, or the only available option will be Swanson. That's not to say that they will be in Swanson in the fall. That's always a cause of concern. We don't intend to place any sophomores in Swanson, but we need a temporary housing assignment to put them in. And then as students leave the university over the summer, they transfer to another university or something like that, we will have some rooms open up. And every year we put some students in Swanson as that temporary assignment. And throughout the summer, they're moved into a sophomore hall. That's happened. We've done this process several years now, and not one of those years has a sophomore been in Swanson. So there's not cause for alarm. It's just to make sure we ultimately have a commitment that everybody's going to have a housing assignment. And so that's sort of where we put folks until something opens up in the traditional sophomore area. I see a couple of questions that I'll just hit right now. Yeah, we'll talk about apartments and the apartment sizes, but generally speaking, apartments of 4 and apartments of 2 are going to be the most plentiful. Probably 4-person apartments, I think, are the highest number. But then there are some 3-person apartments there. They are fairly limited. If there will be, Taylor will talk about how we help students find their roommate groups, but we don't expect the students to do that completely on their own. We host some things that will help, should hopefully help with that. We can go on to the next slide. The lottery is random, so there is not necessarily any advantage to filling out the application first, to forming your group first. We don't do it by GPA. I will tell you, if you call and say, how much can I write a check for you to get my student into Davis, I will gently laugh and tell you we don't do that. It truly is a completely randomized lottery process among those verified roommate groups. So that's the most equitable way that we feel we can do that process. And so we use a housing assignment software program that generates a random lottery time for every student. If a student has a 3-person group selected from current suite mates, well, if they don't get if they have a 3-person group, and when they come time to make a selection, if there are no 3-person apartments left, they'll have to make a decision about how they break up that group, either to pull another student in and make a 4-person group, or to split off into a group of 2 and have another person slotted in somewhere else. As we get close to the end of the lottery, we often have students in our office trying to work through what their options are and how we can help them handle that. I'll put a pause in the questions for a moment while I go into finding roommates. They can go into our housing portal. This whole process is done through the housing portal, which hopefully by this point they're very familiar with. They can search for folks individually, but specific people, they can search for their names and find them and pair with them up through the portal that way. Or the system can make recommendations where they can go in and see who they're most likely to find success with through some matching paradigms. And they also can read a little bit that the student has written about themselves, their interests, their passions, what they're looking for in a roommate, etc. So within the portal, there is a way to match up with various folks and put together that roommate group. And then again, stressing again, once you've got that group, you want to verify. And every year we have students who like form a roommate group, and then it's a little bit like Tinder, like they're in a committed relationship, but then they decide to go look around and see what else might be out there. That will often break up a roommate group. So once the students have that group, they need to refrain from going in and looking to see where the grass is greener. Next slide. So I talked a little bit about roommate group sizes already, but we do need students to be in a group of 2, 3, or 4 and be verified. So for sophomores next year, we have housing available in Kennefic, Hyder, McGloin, Davis, and this year we have a small number of spaces in Opus. I'm sure everybody has read that this is the 3rd largest class in Creighton's history, and the 3rd largest group of freshmen, and now becomes the 3rd largest group of sophomores. So in order to put all of those folks on campus, the 1st floor of Opus, that courtyard area, will be a sophomore community as well. You can see Kennefic has 2-person studios and 3-person triple 1-bedroom apartments. There, if a student, we do co-ed by door in these buildings. So within a particular unit, students are all one sex as assigned at birth, so all male or all female within a room, but next door to each other could be male or female. Kennefic, we reserve a floor for men and a floor for women if single sex is something that's important to a student. They can email us if they're interested in that option. But those are the two. In Kennefic, it's either a 2-person studio or a 3-person 1-bedroom. In Hyder, we have a couple of different floor plans. You can see all of our different floor plans and unit types on our website. If you go in and look, each hall on the website has a traditional floor plan and unit plan laid out. At Hyder, we have efficiency or studio. We have small 1-bedroom, a large 1-bedroom. In each of those 1-bedrooms is 2 students. But then we have suite double and a couple of large 2-bedrooms, a very small number of 2-bedrooms, but those would be four people. In McGloin, it's a super suite style with a living room and a small counter height fridge and a microwave. Those are 4 people per apartment. We also have quads. We have a few lounges that have been converted into quads. They're very large, sort of open floor plan spaces. They have their own dedicated bathroom. I was actually an undergrad at Creighton from '99 to 2003, and these rooms were being used as quads even back then. So it's not a new thing, but with our occupancy, we have that spaces. Those were designed to be converted. And then Davis and Opus, those are the buildings with private bedrooms, so they do tend to go first. Students, that private bedroom experience is in high demand, but there are 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, and 4-bedrooms in each of those buildings. Again, very few 3-bedrooms, very few 2-bedrooms over in Davis and Opus. They are largely 4-person apartments there. We can go to the next slide. So again, Monday, March 24th, that's the deadline to complete and to confirm those initial roommate plans. Thursday, March 27th, roughly, assuming everything happens according to our traditional calendar. At that point, once those time slots have been sent out, roommate groups can be readjusted again if there's a need to do so. Time slots are assigned to every individual. So even if you change groups, the time slot of the group leader dictates that true sign-up time. So if a group ends up breaking up and they go to different directions, whoever person in that new group has the earliest time slot, you want to make sure that person is the group leader. The caveat, though, is the group leader is the only one who can go in and select the apartment at that time and slot everybody into their spaces. So whoever the group leader is going to need to be the person who can actually be at the computer at that time and pick the apartment. Okay, next slide. Before we go into dining locations, I know there's some questions. I will take a look at those while my colleagues present, and then we may have some time to discuss the rest of those questions at the end. But I want to make sure that we get through all of these pieces. So thanks for the questions and keep them coming, and we will work our way through as many of them as we can. If you have any questions, you can always email living@creighton.edu as well. Dining for our sophomores are required to have a meal plan as well. We want to make sure that students, their holistic wellness is taken care of, and that's making sure that they have opportunities to eat and to feed their bodies and minds as well. These dining locations don't change. Obviously, your students are probably very familiar with most of them, but dining halls with our all you care to eat options that continue to be Brandeis and Harper. We have a grocery in McGloin Market, and then several retail options, typically mostly over in Scott Student Center. Um, there's the Starbucks in both Harper and Scott. Wareham Court, our food court options with a Qdoba, the Main Bowl Asian Station, and Firehouse Subs. Jack and Ed's is a convenience store option in Scott Student Center that's actually over the last year we renovated, made much bigger. They have chicken sandwiches fresh there, several grab and go options, and as well as your sort of traditional convenience store options, and then micro markets and the law school, the dental school, the Warner building for Allied and the Medical Sciences Center. We have several of those stationed throughout campus as well. So lots of opportunities for students to either use their weekly meal swipes or their dining dollars. The next slide would talk a little bit about the meal plans continue to work similarly to the meal plans they have this year. Go to the next slide. So we have our all access, the unlimited meal swipes with dining dollars. You can see those first 3 meal plans, the all access, the 14 meal, the 10 meal. Those are the same semester rate. It's just a difference in how many dining dollars do you have per semester. You can sort of pick which level works for you. Do you want more swipes and fewer dining dollars? Do you want less swipes and more dining dollars? Depending on how your students sort of, whatever makes sense to them, their schedule, their routine. The students who are in Davis and Opus, sorry for not including that, Davis, Opus, Kennefic, and Hyder, because they have sort of a more developed kitchen option, they can opt into the apartment 7 meal plan. That's 7 meal swipes a week with dining dollars. And it's a slightly reduced rate compared to the typical meal block meal options that we have for those. Meal plans can only be changed through the first week of classes. Students go into the nest and change their meal plan during that week. After that week, they are pretty well locked in. Typically we default students into the 14 meal. That's where most of our students end up. So we start students there and then we let them change their meal plan when that becomes available. And they get lots of emails about when that time opens up as well. Okay, I want to introduce a new addition at Creighton. We have a brand new campus dietitian who works with students to discuss nutrition, to get the most out of their meal plan value, to make sure that they have an opportunity to discuss allergens, dietary restrictions, and how basically our Sodexo dining program can meet the varied needs of all of our students. So we have Mary Bremer, who's joined us this year and has really dove in, that's the word I'm looking for, dove into working in our dining hall and with our students. So I'll let her introduce herself and speak a little bit more to what she does for students and how she can be a resource to students and families. Mary.
Thanks, Adam. So like Adam said, I'm Mary Bremer. I am the new campus dietitian. I started my role with Creighton back in November. So right before Thanksgiving, I jumped onto campus and then all of our students left for break. So I've still been kind of jumping into my role, but it's been really fun so far. So I'm based out of the dining hall. I have an office downstairs with all of our other dining offices. I do focus a lot of my time working with our allergen-free station. It's called Simple Servings. So that station is, it's free of 8 of the top 9 food allergies. We do serve finfish at that station just so that we can ensure a good variety of protein. So although it is an allergen-free station, so our students that do have food allergies really stick to that station. It's pretty safe for them. We do all we can to prevent cross contact and make sure that even with all sorts of allergies, our students can still eat safely. It's not only for students with allergies. A lot of our students that have no dietary restrictions love the station because it's a full balanced meal all in one station. So we always have a protein, we always have a starch, and we always have some kind of roasted veggie. And then sometimes we do have a cold prepped salad as well. So it does appeal to a lot of our students too that are just being a little bit more mindful about what they're eating in the dining hall. Besides that, I also work closely with students that have other dietary restrictions outside of allergies. So a lot of this so far has looked like students who have doctors that have prescribed certain diets for different diagnoses, walking them through the dining hall, kind of showing them how to best navigate their choices that fall in line with that diet prescription, showing them all of the options. We do have some special plating we can do if there's a diet prescription that is a little bit more restrictive to keep our students safe. So we do work closely with some of those students so that they can still get a plate, get a meal at the dining hall, and still enjoy the social aspect. So our main goal working with these diets and with all of our students is making sure they can get all of the nutrition they need, like Adam said, both to excel on campus and in their classes, but also to be able to participate in the social aspect of dining with their peers. A lot of community building happens in the dining hall and over meals while you're in college and outside of college too. So we really try to make it possible for all of our students to get that benefit. Besides restrictions, I also work with students that just have nutrition questions in general. If they do have different diagnoses and want to learn to manage those diagnoses with nutrition, I work with students for that. A lot of just general healthful nutrition information as well. So, especially for our older students, as they, most of them are going into sophomore year, they might have a kitchen, they might want to start learning how to build a meal plan for themselves and how to eat healthfully and to fuel their brains and their bodies. So we do a lot of fun stuff. I also do some events on campus, mostly through the dining hall. So we've done 2 mocktail events to encourage healthy hydration with our students. And each month we'll have a different mindful event as well. February is Heart Health Month, so we're doing a dark chocolate dipping station with some fruit to talk about the health benefits of dark chocolate and adding some fruit into the diet. So lots of fun things for our students. But if you, as parents, or if your student has any questions, they can always reach me at my email. It's mary.bremer@sodexo, but they can also reach me through the dining hall too if they want to reach out to the dining hall services.
Awesome. Thanks, Mary. Thanks, Adam. We will be moving on to our next panelist, Taylor Logue, Assistant Director of Residential Life.
Hello, good evening. As Morgan said, my name is Taylor. I'm the Assistant Director of Residential Life, and I'm actually currently a master's student here at Creighton and will graduate in May, which is very exciting. I assist in overseeing the sophomore halls, so Davis, Hyder, Kennefic, and McGloin. I've been with Creighton for 3 years now and started out as a resident director in Kennefic and moved to Davis. So I have some experience living in these halls as well, and they're all equally great. Next slide. So we, as Adam said, our partnership kind of looks like him and his crew do a lot of back end work in terms of matching students with rooms and stuff along those lines. Whereas my side of the team does a lot of programming, and through programming, we want to focus on different competencies so your students can grow out of living in halls, basically. So each program that we have within our halls has a different competency, um, whether it's service, faith, and justice, identity establishment, and exploration, or life skills development, diversity, and inclusivity, relationship development, or transitions. So at the beginning of sophomore year, there are probably going to be a lot of programs focused on transitions and how to be a sophomore rather than a first year student. As well as we do a lot of life skills programs. So a few years ago, someone did how to make an omelet and showed their residents how to use their kitchens, because Davis, Hyder, Kennefic, and Hyder, Kennefic, and Opus all have kitchens. And so we really try to focus on each of these competencies at certain points in time, and hope that they bring your students together. Next slide, please. Alrighty, so as Adam said, we have two programs, one that will hopefully bring some first year students who do not have roommate matches going into sophomore year together to kind of get to know each other, which is called the Roommate Mixer. It's going to be Monday, March 5th from 6 to 8 p.m. In Harper 4068/69. So it's just like 2 rooms combined. I just want to say it is normal to not have a roommate selected for your sophomore year. It's normal to be a little bit nervous about what's going to happen your sophomore year. And it's okay not to room with your best friend. We actually encourage you not to do so. My apologies, my cat decided she wanted attention. And so that's what we are here for. Oh, my apologies. It's on Wednesday, March 5th. That's a typo. And so we're here to help you and your students get to know each other. And it's okay if right now you're feeling a little nervous about what's going to happen for next year. At this roommate mixer, we'll have some food, we'll have some questions that you can ask each other, and it's hopefully not going to be awkward. It should be really good and fun. Alrighty, next slide, please. The second program we are hosting is called the Sophomore Open House on Wednesday, March 19th from 5 to 7 p.m. So in each of the sophomore halls, we will have showrooms, and you and or your students and their prospective roommates can go and tour the hall itself, as well as look at some showrooms and just get to know their prospective halls. Next slide, please. Oh, and it's your turn.
Thanks, Taylor. Our next panelist is Anne Hyman, the Director of Student Accessibility Services.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. I have seen a couple questions about accommodation, so I think I'm going to answer them, but if not, keep putting them in the chat. So I'm Anne Hyman. I am the Director of Student Accessibility Service here. So I do the housing accommodations request for disability-related needs. I'm also in the EDD program here at Creighton. So very Creighton focused. I've been at Creighton for about 2 years, but doing disability accommodations for almost 15 years. So very familiar with these things. Next slide. So the accommodation process for housing is students complete the intake form or housing accommodation request form. Sometimes students will do one or the other. It doesn't matter. It gets to us. And then they will provide supporting documentation for the accommodation request. And so students will need to meet with one of us as a SAS staff member to really kind of determine that eligibility if it meets a disability related need with a barrier, and then take the recommendations also from that documentation to see if we can do some housing accommodations. Sometimes we also will kind of rope in and bring in Mary if there's a dietary or meal plan request for those specialty diets and restrictions and allergens and pieces like that. So we work really well to support that. And then we use kind of an all-encompassing way to determine the accommodations process. So we have best practice standards within the ADA 504 world and higher education. We also really take in that student input and then that supporting documentation with the recommendations for the appropriate housing accommodations. So that documentation necessarily isn't like a prescription that we then automatically put into place. We have an interactive meeting with the student to kind of talk through what they're looking for and those pieces. Next slide. So housing accommodations are to remove a living or housing barrier, not to create the most optimal or preferred living environment. So we're really looking at those pieces of what is that barrier to living on campus. And then the housing accommodation, if it's approved, is a direct connection to the disability diagnosis and that barrier to remove that barrier. So those are kind of some of the pieces that tend to be kind of some of that sticking point of we know what it might be preferred or optimal pieces, but we're really looking at going down to what is the direct access piece, because as everyone keeps saying, all of these housing options are great options. It may just not be the best option, or it really is a disability barrier. So we're kind of going through that interactive process there. Housing accommodations are not guaranteed a certain residence hall. So we have a lot of students who are requesting Davis specifically for those private bedrooms. So we're looking to see if the accommodation or need can be met somewhere else, or if it really is a true needing of a private bedroom situation. And we can't guarantee specific roommates with an accommodation either. So we see those two a lot is specific roommate request or specific dorm or specific residence halls with specific roommates. None of that necessarily is directly related to the accommodation piece. They can be sometimes provided in different ways and pieces. Next slide. So this might be where some of those questions are kind of answered. So the students, I really kind of just focused on the rising sophomores. So you're freshmen right now, going to be sophomores who request and approved for housing accommodations prior to March 1st are more than likely guaranteed their accommodations being met, as rooms haven't been assigned. No one's gone into the lottery pieces. No one's been selected. And so we do that on a kind of deadline piece. Accommodations can be requested at any time, but prior to when that lottery system starts, we work really close with housing to make sure that there are kind of the spots and pieces available to meet those accommodations. And so the only piece there is if we have so many accommodations that then over the amount of stock that we have, then that's kind of where that sticking point is. But generally, if you have those accommodations prior to that, like what we're calling priority deadline piece, is that then we can implement those accommodations for the housing. Students do still enter into that application process and the lottery system. The lottery system for students with accommodations is slightly different, and that information is emailed and provided to them through SAS and housing on what that registration piece looks like. They generally are also not building a group of 4. If they have an accommodation, we're building really a group of 2. So that one student with the accommodation and one roommate, so that they can still have access to their accommodation and to that access of kind of selecting their preferred roommate pieces. So it's still really important for students to fill out the housing application piece and those preferred roommates and selecting who they would like to live with as well. That is kind of a standard process there as well. If there's any kind of question or concern, or the student is going through the process, generally they're meeting with someone from my staff. If there's questions or concerns, they can always make an appeal to the director, which is me, on that accommodation. And then I revisit the documentation, meet with the student if need be, and kind of evaluate if there really is a disability barrier or if it would be preferred or optimal. So it's a little bit different here and there. But yes, the students are still going through that kind of that contracting period. Information with housing accommodations, once the student is has met with SAS and got them approved, then they are sent the housing accommodation agreement letter, and then they send that back to SAS. We send that on to housing, and then housing will basically take that information and they'll be contacting the students with accommodations on when their and how their lottery system goes through in March. So it's still, they're going to get those same emails that Adam was talking about. It's just going to be more tied specifically to their lottery process and system as well between that March 1st and then the March 30th before the lottery opens. I think that's it, but next slide. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Anne. So now we'll move on to our Q&A section. So if y'all have any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A. I know we have a few in there right now, so I will go ahead and start directing them to the right folks. So the first question is for Adam/Taylor. How is housing impacted if a student is studying abroad in the second semester?
Yeah, I can answer that. If a student is going abroad in the spring, we get that information from the Global Engagement Office. We sort of know which students are leaving. We communicate with them about moving out. There's kind of 2 ways to do it. One is, if a student's going abroad in the spring, their spring housing agreement will be canceled. And they don't need to worry about any of that. We will put a student, usually we get about the same number of students so studying abroad each semester. So for every student leaving in the spring, there's one coming back from fall abroad. So we slot those students in. Some students get pretty enterprising and they find a swap, and they can tell us, in this apartment where there's this group of 4 and Sally will be here in the fall, but she's going abroad in the spring. So when Sally leaves, we want Jessica to take her place, because Jessica's going to be coming back from abroad. But we don't have the means to facilitate all of that. But if students come to us with a 1-for-1 swap to say, we want to change our rotate through this spot as each of us goes abroad, we can work with the group to make sure that happens. But the students need to sort of find the deal to make there.
Thanks, Adam.
Yeah,
And another
kids can
question,
find a
just
swap on their own. We encourage them to find a swap on their own. I think that's typically a pretty successful endeavor.
awesome. Thanks, Adam. This next question is, I think, for Adam again. What if my student doesn't have a group yet? What should they do?
Yeah, they have 2 options. Well, a couple of options, I guess, just verbally processing through them. And first of all, and I mentioned this in another written answer, a student can opt into basically say, I want housing to put a roommate group together for me. So that's sort of like a safety net for any student to say, put me in a group with folks. And we match with profiles and preferences to try and put those students together to make a successful group. And I'd love to run the statistics on those groups. I think they're probably just as successful, if not more successful, than groups who put themselves together. but they can always just say, y'all do that. I'll take you form a group. Um, they can use the housing portal to find students and reach out to them and say, hey, it looks like we're a pretty good match, and I'm interested in some of the same things you are. Do you want to get coffee at Starbucks and talk about living together next year? Or do you want to just start forming a roommate group now? And so some students are able to go through the portal and match up based on the results that they find, and they can communicate. It'll facilitate emailing back and forth to each student. So they could try and find a group there. Obviously, still they need to find that commitment, but a lot of students come back from the roommate mixer with groups as well. Everybody needs to find a group. So I think for the students who can put themselves out there and feel confident navigating that space, they'll often find a group to be in. But if not, there are plenty of students who say, you know what, just give me somebody to live with. I'm sure it'll be fine. And that works out pretty well for everybody.
Awesome. Thank you.
I'll also say, it really encourages those students to talk to the RAs. The RAs are sort of the social nexus for every student who's saying, hey, I'm not quite sure who I'm going to live with next year. There are other students on the floor sharing that same concern with the RA, or the RAs can talk to other RAs who have their residents saying, I don't know who I'm going to live with next year. I think often students assume they're the only ones who don't know what to do next year, and that's never the case. A lot of people don't know what to do or feel overwhelmed. The nature of that feeling means we don't often see the point of connection with somebody else who's feeling the same way. So RAs, RDs, if for your student, it's just they just need to talk to somebody and sort of find that lever. That might be really helpful for them as well.
Got him. This next question is for Anne. Do students with accommodations get their housing selections first?
So not to go really in depth on all the process, but they are put into the lottery system, but they are then, if they have an accommodation before that March 1st, are guaranteed to meet their accommodation if there is stock available. So if you kind of put two and two together, yes, they are kind of at that forefront to meet some of that accommodation piece there as well.
And it doesn't necessarily mean that they're just going to pick, like they don't get an open theater and get to pick the seat of all of them, right? We're going to randomize a few different types.
Yep.
So it's kind of like a ticket pre-sale at the concert. There's a little bit from here and a little bit from there, sort of proportional to the needs of the group rather than giving an unfettered advantage
Yes.
to those groups.
Thank you, Adam. Yeah. And then depending on what kind of accommodation and pieces, yeah, it is kind of that piece that Adam is talking about, is making sure that there's a mixture and to be able to get that.
Thank you. Adam, another one for you. Will every roommate who is studying abroad be backfilled?
Well, that depends. We don't know quite what the numbers will look like. Typically, our spring occupancy is a percentage point or two lower than our occupancy percentage in the fall. So the chances of a spring vacancy being filled slightly, I don't know if it's even statistically significant, but slightly less likely that a space in the spring would get filled. It depends on how many students are coming back, how many new transfer students we get, but we make sure that everybody gets a housing assignment who needs one, and sometimes that means a space stays vacant if we have enough spaces to fill everybody. But vacant spaces may not get filled with a study abroad student or transfer student, but they might get filled with a roommate conflict, or if there's an emerging accommodation that we need to manage. If a student is living on a floor where an emotional support animal for which they are allergic moves in, they might want to relocate to another space. There are any number of reasons why students change spaces throughout the year. A student who leaves in fall may have a vacancy in January, but in February or March, there's some cost to move a student into that space, or the students in the apartment find somebody who they want to live in that space. So those sorts of things are always in flux. But I think ultimately the takeaway is to never assume that a space is going to stay vacant all semester. We, in fact, instruct students to make sure that the other half of the room stays clean so that we can give 24 hours notice, but we're not always able to do that depending on the situation when a new student's moving in.
Thanks, Adam. It looks like there's another question that just came through. Again, Adam, you might be the best person for this one. What is the percentage of room variations that do not have full kitchens?
Well, let me do a quick math.
Oh, okay.
So, about 23%, but the McGloin spaces represent about 23. I'm not including Opus spaces in that number, or maybe I am. About 23% of the rooms represented by McGloin, and that is a microwave and a small counter height fridge. So I wouldn't call that a full kitchen. But everything in Hyder and Kennefic, Opus and Davis, those are all full kitchens in that they have a fridge, they have a sink, they have a stove and an oven. Transparently, the ovens in Kennefic are 20-inch wide ovens. So they're not as large as the ovens in other halls, but they will still cook a quarter sheet just as well as any other oven.
Thank you. Taylor, a question for you. How many students typically attend the sophomore mixer that you were mentioning earlier?
That's a great question. It varies per year. Last year, I believe we had about 60 students attend.
Right. Well, thank you all so much for answering all of the questions that have come through tonight. If anyone on any of the attendees here tonight have any other additional questions that pop up, feel free to email family@creighton.edu or living@creighton.edu to get some answers. We want to make sure this process is as smooth as possible for you all. I want to give a thank you to all our panelists tonight. Y'all were awesome, gave some great information. And Brooke, could you go to the next slide, please? Again, if y'all have any questions, please email us. If you don't know what to do, call 1212, our front desk. We'll be happy to help you. We hope you all stay warm tonight if you're in cold places, and hope you all have a great evening. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.